Shattered Silence, A Journey of Survival and Healing, by Nanise Munoz, formerly Nicola Nooks. Chapter 4. Leaving Home and the Silence That Followed. When I left my mother's house at 18, I carried more than just a bag of clothes and a small bundle of dreams. I carried an unspoken expectation, a fragile hope that my siblings and I would hold onto our bond. Despite the chaos that marked our shared childhood, there had been moments, rare but powerful, that felt like anchors in a world that often spun out of control. I believed those moments would ground us and keep us connected, even when life inevitably pulled us in separate directions. At home, I had two younger siblings, a brother and a sister who still lived under my mother's roof. Then there was my older brother, who had left home years before I did. He was my half-brother, like me, and together we shared an unspoken connection as the outside children, the ones born outside my mother's marriage. That connection felt special to me. It was something I longed to nurture, but the years and circumstances had created a distance between us that I struggled to bridge. As I stepped out into the world on my own, I hoped my siblings and I would find ways to keep in touch. Yet, the silence from all three of them was deafening. At first, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself they were giving me the space to adjust to my new life. In time, I thought, they'll call or at least check in to say hello. But days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and the calls never came. It didn't take long for me to realize that the responsibility of keeping our bond alive rested squarely on my shoulders. If I wanted to maintain the connection, I had to be the one to act. I got their phone numbers, often through mutual acquaintances or by sheer chance, and I made the effort to call. When we spoke, I would ask how they were doing. I kept the conversations light and warm, deliberately avoiding topics that could stir tension or make them withdraw further. Despite my efforts, though, the interactions always felt one-sided. I reached out, but they never reached back. I began to wonder if my mother had played a role in shaping this dynamic. She had always maintained a close connection with my siblings, especially those born of her marriage. Her bond with them seemed effortless, natural even, but it often left me feeling like an outsider. Had she said something to influence the distance between my siblings and me? I couldn't be sure, but the thought lingered, a quiet undercurrent in my mind. Despite my frustrations, I couldn't bring myself to feel anger or resentment toward my siblings. I loved them deeply. We had never experienced any major conflicts or falling out that could justify the distance between us. When I thought back to our childhood, I recalled the small but meaningful moments that defined our bond. My younger brother and I would sit together watching TV, laughing at silly movies. We'd play games, teasing each other and finding joy in the simplest things. My sister and I weren't as close, but there had always been a quiet respect and understanding between us. I held tightly to those memories as proof that what we shared had been real, even if it hadn't lasted into adulthood. One day, I ran into my sister at a pizza shop where she worked. It was an unexpected encounter, one of the rare occasions when our paths crossed. She greeted me warmly, her kindness washing over me like a brief but comforting embrace. She even insisted on making me a pizza before I left. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In that moment, I was reminded that there was no animosity between us, no hidden grudges or unresolved conflicts. And yet, even after that meeting, she didn't pick up the phone to call me. I thought about my older brother often. I missed him dearly and yearned to reconnect with him. But my mother never encouraged that bond. She had his contact information, but she didn't share it with me. I remember an incident shortly before I left home, during the turbulent time when my mother and I had our falling out. My brother had planned to visit her, but she intercepted him in Kingston. She gave him her version of the story, painting me as the aggressor without acknowledging her role in our conflict. Later, she told me his response. "Don't let me come and see her there." She used those words to justify keeping us apart. I couldn't help but wonder if her actions had planted a seed of division between us. Regardless of her motives, I was left with the sense that she had made little effort to bring us together. What hurt the most was that my brother never considered whether I had the means to leave, if I even had somewhere to go, or even tried to hear my side of the story. That hurt deeply, though I had no choice but to forgive him. Over time, my efforts to maintain contact with my siblings grew less frequent. Each unanswered call or unreciprocated gesture chipped away at my resolve. It wasn't that I didn't care. I cared deeply. but it began to feel like I was shouting into a void, pouring my heart into connections that weren't being returned. Eventually, I stopped trying. It wasn't out of spite or bitterness, but out of self-preservation. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of one-sided relationships. I told myself that if they wanted to reach out, they would. Still, the silence stung in ways I couldn't fully articulate. To this day, I don't know why my siblings chose not to stay in touch. Perhaps their loyalty to my mother played a part, or maybe they simply didn't feel the same sense of obligation to our bond that I did. Whatever the reason, the unspoken distance between us remains. It is a quiet ache that continues to shape my understanding of family and connection. The unspoken rift with my brother. Growing up, my older half-brother and I shared a relationship that, while not perfect, was easy and comfortable. We got along well, and I often admired his quiet strength and independence. He seemed steady, someone I could look up to even when things around us felt uncertain. I remember washing his clothes for him when he lived at home. He would pay me for the effort, and at the time, it made me feel both useful and appreciated. Those were small moments of validation that meant more to me than he might have realized. We rarely had disagreements, but there was one incident that stayed with me for years. My brother had finished using his Principles of Accounts book for school, and it was passed down to me. I was excited to have it and immediately began using it for my studies. But one day, my mother complained to him about something I had done, or more accurately, something she said I had done. I remember the confrontation vividly. My brother, standing beside my mother, turned to me with sharp disapproval in his voice. He threatened to take back the book. Hurt and feeling cornered, I handed it over without a word. I never used it again. Despite that moment, I poured myself into the subject, determined to succeed without the book. When the time came, I graduated with distinction in Principles of Accounts. It was a quiet triumph, one that meant the world to me. A personal victory that spoke to my resilience and resolve. Other than that incident, our relationship was free of major conflict. In fact, I can still recall a moment from our childhood that now feels almost funny in hindsight. My brother owned a stylish denim cap, a prized possession at the time. One day, I borrowed it to wear to school. To my dismay, the cap was stolen. When he came home and questioned us about who had taken it, I denied being the one, just like my other siblings. Years later, I finally confessed to him that I was the one who had borrowed the cap. To my relief, he laughed it off as an insignificant memory. But for me, the guilt lingered far longer than the cap itself ever did. When he eventually left home, the closeness we had shared began to fade. At first, his absence didn't feel permanent. I assumed we would stay in touch. But as time passed, it became clear that he had chosen to disconnect. I searched for him on Facebook, hoping to bridge the gap. But my search only led to a frustrating interaction with someone else who shared his name. Even though my mother and I attended the same church during that time, she never offered to help me reconnect with him. She could have easily given me his contact information, but she didn't. His absence left an unspoken void in my life. He was my brother, my family, yet he felt like a stranger. I often wondered what I had done wrong, or if there was something I could have done differently to preserve our bond. Over time, I came to accept that the distance between us might never close, but the desire for connection never truly faded. Years later, I learned that my brother had moved to St. Thomas, a parish not far from where I was living. After he'd settled in, I decided to take the first step toward reconciliation. I found out where he lived and started visiting him. Each visit brought a mix of emotions, relief at seeing him again, but also a lingering sadness for the years we had lost. I never told him about the conflicts I had with our mother or the reasons I left home. I didn't want to burden him with my pain or risk reopening old wounds. Instead, I focused on rebuilding our relationship in the present. By then, he was living with his children's mother, and I respected his new life while trying to carve out a small space for myself in it. One memorable day, there was a family gathering, and for the first time ever my mother offered to pick me up as she was passing close by my house. I would ride with her and whoever else was in her vehicle to my brother's house. From there we would all ride together in my brother's vehicle to the event destination. It was a rare occasion when we were all in the same space, and I hoped it would bring us closer. However, during the ride when we were all together in my brother's vehicle, my mother made a pointed remark about me being stubborn or feisty. By then, I had learned to handle such comments with grace. I replied lightly, "Well, if I'm feisty, I must have gotten it from either my mother or my father." The tension dissolved with a chuckle, but the moment stayed with me as a reminder of how fragile family dynamics can be. Why would she say that well into my adult life is beyond me? On another occasion, when I was preparing to attend university, I reached out to my brother for help with my tuition fees. He initially agreed to assist me, and I was grateful for his support. But when the time came, he stopped answering my calls. I was disappointed, but I didn't hold it against him. By then, I had grown accustomed to handling life's challenges on my own. Reflecting on his absence and our limited interactions, I realized that his presence or lack thereof has shaped my understanding of family and connection. His withdrawal often felt like an unspoken rejection, but I've come to see it as more complex than that. Perhaps he was dealing with his own struggles, ones he couldn't share with me. Or perhaps he simply didn't know how to bridge the gap between us after so many years apart. What I do know is that I've always valued our bond, even when it felt one-sided. Rebuilding our relationship has been a slow and ongoing process, but each visit, each conversation, is a step forward. His absence taught me the importance of persistence and forgiveness, not just toward him, but also toward myself. Family ties are rarely perfect, but they are worth fighting for, even when the fight feels lonely. One-sided connections. My role in the relationship. Relationships, I've come to realize, are often shaped by the effort we're willing to invest in them. For me, the effort wasn't a choice. It was a necessity, especially within my family. I was always the one initiating contact, the one trying to mend the cracks, the one holding on to the belief that, no matter how strained or distant, family was worth the work. But over time, a disheartening pattern began to emerge. The effort was one-sided. I was always the one reaching, while the other side remained static. My brother's absence was particularly painful. The distance between us after he left home wasn't just physical. It was emotional, a gap that seemed impossible to close. I yearned to maintain our bond, but I lacked the means to do so. I didn't have his phone number, his address, or even a reliable way to contact him. All I knew was that he had moved to another parish, a fact I learned not from him, but through fragmented accounts from others. Unable to call or write, I turned to social media, specifically Facebook, as my last resort. Night after night, I would search for his name, scrolling through endless profiles and studying photographs with an almost desperate hope that one might lead me to him. Each attempt ended in frustration. The sheer number of dead ends was overwhelming, and with each fruitless search, I was left to confront a painful truth. I was searching for someone who wasn't searching for me. This pattern extended beyond my brother to others in my family. Time and again, I found myself being the one to reach out, asking how they were, making the effort to keep our relationships intact. Yet their responses were often brief and impersonal, as if keeping in touch was a chore rather than a desire. Rarely, if ever, did anyone take the initiative to reach out to me first. The emotional toll of this imbalance was undeniable. It forced me to question my place within the family and the worth of the connections I was working so hard to maintain. Was it worth the struggle if the effort wasn't mutual? Did my role as the initiator mean I cared more than they did? These questions weighed heavily on me, leaving me feeling overlooked and unimportant. At times, the lack of reciprocity felt like a quiet form of rejection. It was as if my attempts to connect were met with indifference, a painful reminder that my efforts might mean more to me than they did to anyone else. That realization cut deep. But rather than give in to the pain, it strengthened my resolve. If they wouldn't reach out, I would. If they wouldn't bridge the divide, I would build the bridge myself. Looking back, I've come to understand that my persistence wasn't just about them. It was about me. It was about my need to feel connected, to feel like I had a place where I truly belonged. The effort I put into these relationships, even when it felt like I was carrying the weight alone, was a reflection of my values and my belief in the enduring importance of family. When I think back to my brother, I often wonder how he perceived our relationship. Did he see my efforts as overbearing, something unnecessary? Or did he believe that our bond was unshakable, capable of withstanding the silence without effort? I may never know the answers to these questions, but they linger, quietly shaping how I view family and my role within it. In many ways, navigating the one-sided nature of these relationships taught me resilience. I learned to keep pushing forward, even in the face of rejection or indifference. It forced me to hold tightly to my values, even when they weren't acknowledged or mirrored. But just as importantly, these experiences taught me about boundaries, how to recognize when my constant efforts were depleting me instead of nourishing me, and when I needed to step back for my own emotional well-being. Still, despite the heartache and imbalance, I have no regrets about the energy I invested in these relationships. Every phone call I initiated, every search I conducted, every attempt I made to bridge the divide was a testament to the love I had for my family and my unwavering desire to stay connected. The outcomes weren't always what I had hoped for, but there was meaning in the effort itself. Even when it felt futile, the effort was my way of expressing what mattered most to me: family. Bittersweet encounters. Reconnecting with my siblings, even briefly, always felt tenuous, like holding on to something delicate that could slip away at any moment. The time I ran into my sister at the pizza shop was one such fleeting moment, filled with emotions I didn't know how to fully process. She greeted me with a warmth that seemed genuine, her smile lighting up her face as soon as she saw me. It had been years since we'd last spoken, and the distance between us felt like a chasm. But for a brief moment, I sensed the faint echo of our old bond, the connection forged by years of shared memories. She made me a pizza. It was such a small act, yet it carried a significance that would have seemed invisible to anyone else. As she handed it to me, it felt as though the weight of all those years of silence, separation, and unspoken words had been momentarily lifted. We exchanged pleasantries, engaged in a quick, casual conversation. On the surface, it was a pleasant surprise to see her again. I was genuinely happy in that moment. But when I reflected on it later, I couldn't help but question what lay beneath the encounter. Was her warmth a gesture of affection, or was it born from an unspoken sense of obligation? A quiet acknowledgement that, despite the years of distance, we were still family? As I replayed our interaction in my mind, I realized that, despite the smiles and kind words, it lacked depth. It was polite, cordial, and kind, but it danced carefully around the years that had separated us. There was no acknowledgement of the silence that stretched between us, no mention of the unspoken pain of those lost years. It was as though the past had been erased in favor of this brief, surface-level connection. And just as quickly as the moment came, it was gone. After that chance meeting, we didn't see each other again for years, and the silence between us returned unbroken. This pattern of brief, almost coincidental reunions with my siblings repeated itself over the years. Each time, I found myself left with the same bittersweet aftertaste. The moments were warm, yes, but fleeting, never enough to bridge the gap that time and distance had carved between us. I often wondered if the distance we felt was a reflection of how much we'd changed as individuals, or simply a consequence of all the years that had passed. In many ways, it felt as though we were strangers bound by shared history, thrown together by circumstances, but never truly finding a way to reconnect in any meaningful sense. I also ran into my younger brother at the passport office once. Like my sister, our exchange was brief and casual, almost superficial. It was as if we had agreed, without words, to avoid touching on anything too deep. We spoke as though time hadn't passed, but the unspoken truths lingered between us, heavy and undeniable. There was so much I wanted to say, so much I knew he wanted to express too, but the words simply wouldn't come. Instead, we skirted around what mattered, settling for neutral topics that felt inconsequential in the larger scheme of our lives. The polite small talk masked the reality of our strained relationship, and as we parted, I found myself feeling mix of emotions. I was happy to see my brother after so long, but there was also a lingering sense of longing, knowing that our time together was brief. The conversation was light, but beneath it, I wished for something deeper, more time, more connection. As I walked away, I carried both the joy of seeing him and the weight of how fleeting it was. These interactions seemed to underline a growing distance, one that I didn't know how to bridge. Despite everything, I kept telling myself they were still my family, still my blood. But each encounter reminded me that our connection was slipping further away. I yearned for more than pleasantries. I wanted to understand the truth of what had fractured us, to talk about the past, to untangle the years of silence, and to rediscover the bond we had once shared. Yet those opportunities never came, and I was left with the ache of longing for a connection that refused to surface. These brief meetings left me ruminating on the nature of family, the complexities of relationships, and the emotional weight of maintaining them. Why was it so hard to break through the barriers that had formed? Was it because I hadn't tried hard enough? Or was it the years of unspoken pain that had solidified into an unyielding wall? I often questioned if I was the only one who felt this way, if I was the only one still haunted by the ties that had once bound us. Did they, too, feel the sting of our fractured connection? These encounters were bittersweet, tinged with the warmth of familiarity and the sting of estrangement. They reminded me of what we had been, of what we could have been if things had turned out differently. There was affection between us, but it was cloaked in a politeness that acted as a shield, keeping us from digging deeper. Despite our shared history, we had become strangers in many ways, bound only by blood and the occasional chance meeting. Reflecting on these moments made me realize how deeply they shaped my sense of belonging or my lack of it. I desperately wanted to feel connected to my family, to know that I mattered to them. But each passing silence and each unresolved moment chipped away at that hope, leaving me questioning my place in their lives. Was I merely an afterthought? Someone they remembered only when circumstance threw us together? These fleeting encounters didn't bring me the answers I craved. Instead, they magnified the ambiguity and the ache of lost connection. The love I felt for them and the faint glimmers of affection they showed were overshadowed by the weight of what remained unspoken. In the end, I was left grappling with the paradox of family, a bond that endured in theory but was fractured in practice, a connection maintained by blood yet stretched thin by years of silence and missed chances. The ache of absence. There are moments in life when the absence of something carries a weight far heavier than its presence. This was undeniably true of the silence that lingered between me and my family, a silence so profound it felt almost physical. It settled in the pit of my stomach, an ache that seemed to expand during times when family should have gathered, times when love and togetherness should have filled the air. Christmas was always the hardest. While others gathered around their tables, sharing laughter and joy, I sat alone. The emptiness felt sharper on those nights, the contrast between my solitude and the warmth I imagined in other homes making the silence feel unbearable. A few kind-hearted friends, aware of my isolation, occasionally invited me into their celebrations. Their gestures offered temporary relief, like a balm for a wound, but the comfort never lasted long. Even surrounded by well-meaning people, I couldn't escape the hollow space inside me, the space carved out by the absence of my own family. The disconnect from my own flesh and blood remained, an ever-present shadow that grew heavier with time. No matter how much kindness I encountered, the pain of being estranged from the people who were supposed to know me best was unshakable. Holidays in solitude. Holidays like New Year's Day were no better. The world seemed to hum with togetherness, every celebration an echo of unity I couldn't feel. I spent those days in solitude, reflecting on the gaping hole where my family's presence should have been. At times, the loneliness felt as though it had seeped into my very bones, and I couldn't help but wonder if my own sense of worth was tied to this absence of connection. In those moments, depression loomed, hovering in the shadows, ready to take hold. But somehow my faith in God, paired with the quiet reassurance that I wasn't truly alone in this vast world, helped me through. I reminded myself that my journey was different, unique in its struggles and lessons. While others gathered with their families, and though it hurt, I understood that my path was entirely my own. Lessons in giving. I made it my responsibility to visit my mother occasionally during Christmas. One particular year stands out in my memory. I had saved my Christmas bonus for something I needed, something important. But instead, I gave it all to her, hoping it would express my love and appreciation. I gave her the money because I thought it was the right thing to do. I just wanted to show love, as I felt a sense of obligation to express my gratitude. The gesture, while meaningful, left a mark. It taught me something I didn't fully understand at the time. I couldn't keep giving away what I needed to survive. Sacrificing my own well-being wasn't sustainable, and over the years, I learned to use what I had to take care of myself. Still, even as I made those changes, the rare invitations from my mother during the holidays didn't fully mend the ache of the quiet that lingered the rest of the time. My family remained emotionally scattered, distant in ways that even a shared holiday couldn't fix. The chasm between us was still there, ever present and unyielding. Fleeting moments of connection. Those rare invitations to my mother's house were always bittersweet. Stepping into the family gathering sparked a brief flicker of connection, a fleeting sense of belonging. I'd sit in the living room, engage in light conversation, and soak in the energy of family. In those moments, I truly felt good. I felt like I was part of something, like I belonged. It felt like home, but the feeling never lasted. Years of silence and distance had built a barrier too deep to be broken by a single meal or a few shared hours in the same room. For a time, I could lose myself in the warmth. But once the gathering ended, the illusion would fade. The lack of consistency, the absence of real connection, made it clear. As comforting as those moments were, they couldn't sustain the kind of home I longed for. The absence of consistency, of genuine connection, made these gatherings feel like a fragile illusion of family rather than the real thing. As much as I cherished those small windows of togetherness, they couldn't erase the deeper ache of what was missing, the longing for family. Even though the silence weighed heavily on my heart, it didn't stop me from seeking connections with others. The absence of family didn't close me off to the possibility of finding belonging elsewhere. Still, it left me with questions I couldn't quite shake about my place in the world, my worth, and my value. As much as I tried to build relationships beyond the bounds of blood, there was always a lingering sense of incompleteness. It felt as if a vital piece of my life was missing, a gap that no amount of connection could entirely fill. Even in the presence of love and friendship, the void created by the lack of a stable family remained. Finding strength in silence. Over time, I learned to navigate this emotional landscape. I looked for family in unexpected places. These included friendships, shared moments, and the kindness of others. Each new relationship brought its own set of challenges. While I found solace in these bonds, there was always an ache for the family I had once hoped to rebuild. I had to reconcile that, though I could create a chosen family, the absence of my own flesh and blood would remain a silent, ever-present part of my story. The silence from my siblings lingered like a quiet ache, one I carried with me through every holiday, milestone, and moment when the presence of family would have meant everything. Though I found comfort in the love of friends and those who became like family, the void was undeniable. Still, I learned to live with it and accept it as part of my journey. I realized that as much as I longed for connection, I had to become my own source of strength and my own pillar of support. Looking back, I came to understand that the weight of silence wasn't just about the absence of others, it was also about the absence I felt within myself. That silence forced me to look inward, to ask the questions I had avoided for so long. Who am I? What do I mean to others? It was during this time of introspection that I discovered the depth of my resilience. I came to see the quiet strength that allowed me to carry on, even when loneliness threatened to overwhelm me. In the end, the silence that once felt unbearable became something I could live with. It was never easy. The holidays still felt incomplete, but I came to understand that my identity didn't need to hinge on the presence or absence of others. My journey, shaped by solitude and introspection, taught me to find family in the most unexpected places and to embrace the person I had become along the way. Finding family in unexpected places. The church as a lifeline. At every stage of my journey, the church stood as a steady source of community and comfort. It wasn't just a place for worship. It became a refuge where I found a sense of belonging that I had long been missing. Within its walls, I met friends who bridged the gaps left by the absence of my family. These friendships often extended far beyond Sunday services. Some friends invited me into their homes, where we shared meals and celebrated milestones together. Their kindness and companionship filled spaces in my heart that I thought would remain empty forever. Through them, I learned that family could exist in forms I hadn't expected, and that love wasn't always bound by blood. University connections. When I started university, I formed a handful of meaningful friendships that brought a new sense of richness to my life. I had never been someone who needed a large circle of close friends, but the few I had meant everything to me. One friend in particular stood out. We shared a deep connection, often visiting each other's homes and supporting one another through life's inevitable ups and downs. These gestures, though simple, reminded me that family isn't solely defined by blood. Family can also be found in those who choose to stand by you, offering love and support without obligation. Church friendships beyond the pews. Friendships from church remained a vital part of my life, offering a sense of connection that I deeply cherished. Both the male and female friends I met there became trusted, long-term companions. Together, we shared outings, meaningful conversations, and occasional visits to one another's homes. These moments of connection felt like brief yet profound glimpses of the familial bonds I had always longed for. They created spaces filled with warmth and acceptance, places where I felt truly seen and valued. A mentor's kindness. One of the most impactful relationships I formed was with my Bible school principal. She often invited me into her home for sleepovers, where I helped her organize books, worked on her computer, and taught her how to navigate different apps and programs. Sometimes I simply spent time keeping her company. Her kindness and generosity in sharing her time and space gave me a sense of belonging that I had long been missing. She became more than just a mentor. She felt like family. Redefining family. These friendships weren't just casual. They were lifelines. In the absence of the closeness I longed for from my biological family, these relationships became vital reminders that love, support, and understanding could come from unexpected places. Each one taught me that family isn't defined solely by shared bloodlines. It's built on shared experiences, mutual care, and the willingness to open one's heart and home to another. Healing and acceptance. Reflection on what I have learned. In the quiet space between absence and connection, I discovered some of my most profound lessons. The distance I once felt from my family forced me to confront my own emotional needs and the void they left behind. I came to understand that healing isn't always about seeking others to fill that emptiness. Sometimes, it's about finding peace within yourself. By accepting the silence instead of resisting it, I uncovered a strength I didn't know I possessed. I realized that my identity wasn't solely rooted in my family or my past. It was shaped by the choices I made to move forward and redefine myself. Forgiveness and understanding in my journey. Forgiveness became a vital part of my healing journey. There were moments when I resented the distance, the silence, and the lack of communication. But with time, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the hurt. It was about freeing myself from the weight of carrying that pain. Recognizing my family's limitations allowed me to accept that each of us had our own battles to face. In doing so, I was able to release the anger that had taken root in my heart. I came to understand that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain and embracing healing instead of holding on to resentment. Building my own life outside of these relationships. As I embraced healing and forgiveness, I began to focus on building a life beyond the fractured dynamics of my family. I shifted my attention to my own growth, the friendships I had nurtured, and the opportunities that shaped the person I aspired to become. It became a process of reclaiming my sense of worth, not through the approval or recognition of others, but through my own belief in myself. I created a life rooted in faith, meaningful connections, and self-respect. Over time, I came to understand that the most important relationships I could cultivate were the ones I had with God and with myself. Encouragement for others. To anyone who has experienced the ache of disconnection, I want you to know this. You are not alone. I understand the void left by the absence of familiar bonds, but I also want to assure you that healing is possible. It's not a quick fix or an easy road. It's a journey that begins with acceptance and unfolds over time. The path to healing may feel long and difficult, but take heart. Growth often emerges from adversity, and the strength to overcome already lies within you. As the Bible reminds us in Isaiah 41 verse 10, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." That concludes Chapter 4. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for Chapter 5 in the next video.